Good morning everyone, I'm Chan Kei, match number is 220037. Today my team member and I from Group 7 will present about the US war against Iraq in 2003. It's one of the major wars in the Middle East in the 21st century. My team member have Muhammad Shami, Muhammad Huzaifa, Danesh, Nur Atira and me. First is background. The Iraq War first included two countries, which is United States and Iraq. It happened when 2003 until 2011. This war was started by United States, which was led by the President George Walker Bush. The first issue that the United States invasion Iraq was the United States authorities suspected Iraq have the weapon of destruction, which is WMD, which the weapons like chemical nuclear that can kill and bring significant harm to numerous humans in the world. Besides, the Iraqi President Saddam Hussein helped Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda is the complex international Islamic terrorist network made up of regional affiliated organizations. Next is introductions. The United States is a great power country which is from the side of economy and military power. The United States is more powerful than other countries. And the Iraq was the terrorist country. It was because the Iraq supported Al-Qaeda, which made the invited in the crisis 9/11 terrorist attack. But focus on the military power and the economy between these two countries, the United States is more powerful. It means that the United States may have more troops and more weapons and more strategy used in this war. In this case, the United States was sent 19.2 million troops and Iraq sent 45 million troops. And of course, in this case, this war will bring extra adverse effect from the side of economy, politics, and other side, because the unfair from the side of power was happening in this war.
Assalamualaikum and hi, my name is Muhammad Huzaifa bin Hamzah 2200-277 from 2FSTPA. My program is Sarjana Muda Sains Komputer, Keselamatan Sistem Komputer. Problem statement. We need to know what are the problems that had caused the war to occur. The invention of orbital guns and technology in Iraq, all through United Nations inspections within the mid-1990s. And on 2003, the worldwide network turned into disappointed through Iraq's reserved disobedience of the United Nations guns ban and human interference with inspections. Then Iraq refused to permit inspectors again in after the US attack, and monetary sanctions commenced to erode over the following couple of years.
The objective of the US versus Iraq War 2003. The first one is to discuss about the US war against Iraq in 2003 that happened when the US Army invaded Iraq, intending to eliminate Iraq's weapons of mass destruction, WMD. Second one, to put an end to Saddam Hussein's brutal dictatorship.
Next is theoretical framework. Theoretical framework is the structure that can hold or support theory of a research study. The research started analysis with the forbidden weapons and technology were discovered in the Iraq War. Therefore, in this research, we also analyze the another reasons that caused this war, the strategy that used in this war, result, impact, and lesson learned from this war.
Okay, so multiple sources were taken to come out with the literature review. The first one is Ahmad Mahdi, who wrote Energy and US Foreign Policy in 2012 that dives deep into how and why oil has been a driving force for America to be involved wherever it becomes known. This depicts why US faced challenges to its supremacy upon its failure to take over Iraq. Moreover, the analysis of United States politics had focused heavily on character studies. Due to the lack of clarity and information regarding this matter, no final say is able to be produced. Political researchers come to a standstill due to the lacking input and results of the US policy decision. Next is Bob Woodward's plan of attack, written in 2004, that talks about how President George W. Bush and his subordinates misused their power together with his war council to spread lies and lead the nation to war against Iraq. He poisoned the people's minds with exercising misinformation and deception. Next is James Feiffner and Mark Fintia's Intelligence and National Security Policy Making on Iraq, British and American Perspectives, written in 2008, that depicts how the US and UK had a hand in the war. They justified their interference by claiming that they were there to save Iraq from an ill treatment of Saddam Hussein. The study also shows how and what repercussions of the war. The next study is done by L. Josh Bivens, The War in Iraq and the Global Economy, which is a study that shows the risk of the war on different countries. There are enormous economic risks like hampering global economic growth due to higher oil prices. Next, disruptions of international trade impede international coordination in fighting global recession. One example from the study that depicts the risk of war can be seen in European Union countries. Firstly, the European Union depends on petroleum for 41% of domestic energy needs, slightly more than the US. Next, rising oil prices due to the conflict can increase inflation, making the European Central Bank (ECB) reluctant to engage in monetary easing necessary for economic recovery. Even the legendary Paul Walker would do the same given the circumstances, and he is known to be the man who broke the back of inflation in the 70s.
Then is methodology. The methodology that we use in this report is qualitative method. Qualitative method is the method that do not involve measurement or statistics. So we use the online library methods, research method, analysis of the document, and the theoretical. We use this method to analyze the data in writing our discussion analysis. Next is about discussion analysis. We discussion analysis the reasons, the strategy used in war, the result, the impact, and the lesson learned from this war. Firstly, the cause of the war is trade to the United States. It's because Iraq pursued the various major category of weapons of mass destruction WMD when 1991 Gulf War. Why President Iraqi Saddam Hussein pursued the weapons? It's because the Saddam Hussein wanted to ensure that the strength of his regional power. Before the Gulf War, Iraq had nuclear weapons program, but Iraq's security contractor declared duplicate facility. And Iraq has an Iraqi atomic scientist which is called Hamza. But Iraq signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which is NPT. Iraq cannot get a source of antimony in another country due to the Iraq have ensured by the IAEA, which is called International Atomic Energy Agency. Therefore, Iraq cannot continue the program, but Iraq believes that it can secretly build and declare duplicate facility. Therefore, the United States suspended. Iraq still have the weapons mass of destruction, but the quantity that is unknown. So it's become a threat to the United States. The second cause of Iraq war is accept the evil. The accept the evil is the term that used by the United States President George Walker Bush to describe the country involved in terrorism and weapons of mass destruction. So Iraq is one of the countries involved in acts of evil. The Iraq President Saddam Hussein employed the Palestinian suicide bomber. Besides that, the case of the 9/11 attack terrorism has killed nearly 3,000 people in the United States. So you can clearly know that the Iraq is one of the acts of the evil. So United States start the war to avoid the crisis happen again. The third process of Iraq war is the natural resource of Iraq. Iraq has the second largest oil producers in organization of the petroleum exporting country with a core OPEC that in a range to secure reasonable and steady price for the petrol maker. Moreover, the oil in Iraq is high demand due to the higher grade quality tremendous supply which demonstrates the most essential that oil of Iraq have the lowest cost, which is $1 per barrel, counting oil investigations, exercise, improvement, and generation costs. And the United States invasion in Iraq is to ensure that the Iraq continually supply oil to the United States so the United States can get the profit from it. The last causes of Iraq war is to end the dictatorship of the President Iraqis, which is the President Saddam Hussein. The President Saddam Hussein used his power that forced a trample on human rights. During the Iran-Iraq War in 1980s, there is a campaign called R-Enforce movement and involved the mass scare of 150,000 to 200,000 people. Moreover, in 1988, the Saddam Hussein used the mustard gas and nerve agents to bomb 5,000 citizens in the Kurdish village of Rabia. From here, we can know that Saddam Hussein has committed a crime against humanity. So, due to the humanity reasons, the United States started the war.
Next, strategy used in the war. These strategies are personalized analysis based on readings, findings, and research done. Since there were no article or discussion that specifically mentioned about the strategies used by both countries, here are the sum up of the overall indicator. First, the grand strategy. Basically, this grand strategy is a formulation of the rules of engagement and the determinations of the objective to be attained by the military operation, which are all a part of the decision-making process whether to initiate war. The arguments in favor of the strategy refers to the cause of the war, in which the US took matters into their own hands by launching bombing campaign and start invading Iraq in March 2003 in order to undertake and destroy Iraqi weapon of mass destruction, which is WMD, as a way to demolish the Saddam Hussein's dictatorial rule. And as a result, the two countries are trading back and forth, and when the WMD intelligence turned out to be false, the war widowed Iraq violence insurgency, resulting to Saddam Hussein was apprehended, persecuted, and hung, followed by a democratic election. This strategy also requires knowledge of both political and military operations. The strategy denotes having to deal with national policy problems, areas where political, economic, and psychological, also military factors overlap in order to bridge military means and political goals. Considering it as a high-level military planning, using propaganda to manipulate certain situations or benefit one side power is also one of the examples. Posting footage or videos online as a recruiting tool will demonstrate attacks and influence public opinion. Next, using strategic dialogues to discuss further rehab on neutralizing co-relation between both countries. One of the contexts of the discussion mentioned on reinforcing the long-term strategic allies are through security force assistance (SFA) and mutual key issues such as stability in the region, healthcare, global warming, power efficiency, energy development, humanitarian assistance, human rights, economic ties, and educational and cultural exchange, and among others. Not only that, the two delegations reiterated their resolve to maintain and deepen their strategic cooperation through distinct national security interests and shared interest in stability, which also acknowledge each other's various coordination bodies outlined in the SFA. This measure, on the other hand, appeared to be a strategy measure with a little realistic chance of entering and lessening or ending the decades-long hostility between two parties. Second, the operation of grand tactics military strategy. Simply said, it is a military operation in which forces management in seeking to achieve progress toward tactical goals that must be aligned with strategy and implemented battle planning goals. Despite the fact that its component is a military tactics, it imposes a good tactical level which may be used as a defensive measure or a counterback. When deployed during a battle, however, this tactic is considered as damaging, dangerous, and cold-bloodedly aggressive. Even during Saddam Hussein's reign, several inhuman actions were carried out and resulting in a widespread violence against civilians. IEDs or improved explosive devices are one of them. The percentage of attacks that are steady and fatal is higher due to its complicated and seldom discovered methods. The Pentagon estimated that 250,000 tons of ordnance were taken, and given that militants and almost limitless supply of munition, then mortar and rocket assaults that coalition bases or linked bases are the next most prevalent kind of attacks. Regrettably, insurgents were also utilizing the highly populated civilians in the cities and the metropolitan region.
Result of the war. We can say that the United States has won the war, even though they has lost in about 4,474 soldiers, with thousands more heavily injured, and spending in about $1 trillion on a war that has wreaked havoc on their economy at home. As for the Iraq, all of Iraq's civil society has been wiped out, and about 100,000 people have been slaughtered, and all the country has now is just a small but active branch of Al-Qaeda.
War is something that nobody likes, and more importantly, there are no positive impacts that come from war, but there are abundance of negative impacts that come from war. The first impact is unwanted loss of lives. During war, it is an inevitable fact that people will die. Let it be your own countryman or let it be the foreigner who is right beside you. But in all factors, people die no matter what. During war, it is an inevitable fact that people die. That is the main impact of war. People die unwantedly in the name of fighting for their country or fighting against the evil force that has been claimed by their leader. Kids, women, old people, no one is spared. Everyone has a major possibility of dying. One good example is when retired Navy SEAL Lieutenant Commander Jocko Willing states in his book Extreme Ownership that during his deployment to Ramadi, Iraq as Task Unit DUS commander, his petty officer Michael Mansour was killed in action. He jumped on a grenade to save his fellow teammates. Mansour was later given a Medal of Honor for his heroic action. All in all, this was a major impact for his family, friends, and many more people. He will forever leave a void in people's heart for the person he was. Not only will his parents have to live with the fact that their child died before them, but more importantly, his children will grow up probably never ever knowing their father. The next impact is there will be no education, and there might be a whole generation of people where they don't even know how to read and write. During war, every stage of education is put to a stop. You may be a student who's just starting his education in kindergarten. At the same time, you might be a PhD holder in probably neuroscience who's going to get his second PhD. So, for example, in Admiral William H. McRaven's book, Sea Stories, he states that during a raid in one of Saddam Hussein's hideout, they found heavily dangerous IEDs. The tech of building such a fascinating weapon made them stand speechless. With such terrible conditions and limited supplies, the Al-Qaeda managed to build a weapon so sophisticated that everyone was amazed at their skill set. This led to the US military heightening their defenses and tactics. They came to the conclusion that the Al-Qaeda was not a bunch of hooligans making trouble, but they too had the brains that could rival eventually kicking the US government out. This goes to show that talent goes to waste, that too in a horrifying way, when people's education are abruptly put to a stop. So the next impact is no human rights will be followed. That means people will not have a say if any sin or anything is happening towards them. Or possibility of women being raped and molested just because for the fun of it is a high possibility during this time of war. One example is retired Navy SEAL Chief Petty Officer David Goggins states in his book Can't Hurt Me that during his deployment to Iraq he saw many unspeakable actions done by Iraqis to their own kind. Raid parties were always being held. Women were treated worse than stags. Men were tortured on a daily basis. The Al-Qaeda terrorists were so egregious that even a woman who had a period were not safe. They would be forced to do sexual things that made immense anxiety and depression to the victim. There was no one to help them or put a stop to their actions. Every human deserves their basic rights. No one should be treated indifferently by another fellow human being. All in all, war only has negative impacts on people's life. There is nothing to be gained. So there is no point in having a war given that our own countrymen are dying for unwanted reasons. Okay, so multiple sources were taken to come out with the literature review. The first one is Ahmad Mahdi, who wrote Energy and US Foreign Policy in 2012, that dives deep into how and why oil has been a driving force for America to be involved wherever it becomes known. This depicts why US faced challenges to its supremacy upon its failure to take over Iraq. Moreover, the analysis of United States politics had focused heavily on character studies. Due to the lack of clarity and information regarding this matter, no final say is able to be produced. Political researchers come to a standstill due to the lacking input and results of the US policy decision. Next is Bob Woodward's plan of attack, written in 2004, that talks about how President George W. Bush and his subordinates misused their power together with his war council to spread lies and lead the nation to war against Iraq. He poisoned the people's minds with exercising misinformation and deception. Next is James Fifner and Mark Fintia's Intelligence and National Security Policy Making on Iraq, British and American Perspectives, written in 2008, that depicts how the US and UK had a hand in the war. They justified their interference by claiming that they were there to save Iraq from an ill treatment of Saddam Hussein. The study also shows how and what were the repercussions of the war. The next study is done by L. Josh Bivens, The War in Iraq and the Global Economy, which is a study that shows the risk of the war on different countries. There are enormous economic risks like hampering global economic growth due to higher oil prices. Next, disruptions of international trade impede international coordination in fighting global recession. One example from the study that depicts the risk of war can be seen in European Union countries. Firstly, the European Union depends on petroleum for 41% of domestic energy needs, slightly more than the US. Next, rising oil prices due to the conflict can increase inflation, making the European Central Bank, ECB, reluctant to engage in monetary easing necessary for economic recovery. Even the legendary Paul Walker would do the same given the circumstances, and he is known to be the man who broke the back of inflation in the 70s.
The lessons for US versus Iraq. The first one is there are grand strategies, not just tactics or methods. Second, be wary of placing foreign policy decision in long-term historical thinking. The third one, the US did not win in any meaningful sense. And next, Iraq's war surprisingly features how few individuals were involved in planning. And the last one, local identities are still very strong.
As for the summary of this research, we know that on 2003, the war started by the US claim to destroy Iraqi Mass Weapon Destruction (WMD), and also they want to end the dictator stance rule by Saddam Hussein, and also to avoid chaotic situation occurring in the world. And there are several theories said that Iraq war occurred because of national interest, and this concept might be the one of main purposes why US want to invade Iraq. And finally, the war has ended on 2003 by the US troops leave Iraq.
Therefore, as a result, the conflict can lead to a drop in the economy and the displacement of people. It's because there are 186 veterans have committed suicide almost every week, and there are more than 500 people every month to be added to the loss in factor. And there are 2 million people who have lost their home. And the most important thing is, these conflicts can cause them to go bankrupt. Next, the recommendation in this research is identify the diplomatic and political effort in Iraq and the region. The political offensive related to the regional participants should be promote economic assistance and commercial trade and political support from non-neighboring Muslim countries to the Iraq government, and provide the military assistance when possible. If these measures are effectively implemented, which is the Iraq government promote national reconciliation, the Iraqis will have a chance to have a better future. The terrorists will be hit. The stability in the important part of the world will be strengthened. The credibility of the United States will be improved, and the influence will be improved, so that the United States get the promo and the value will be improved and be protected.